I never thought I'd be back in a classroom, let alone as a student again. The room smelled faintly of chalk and warm coffee, the kind of scent that clings to wooden desks after decades of stories. Outside, the rain tapped lazily against the tall windows, as if it had nothing better to do than eavesdrop. She walked in exactly on time. Not a second early. Not a second late. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice smooth yet carrying a quiet authority that made the air in the room feel heavier. Her name was Miss Harlow, and she didn't need to tell anyone she was in charge. You could feel it. Tall, poised, her dark hair swept back into a tight knot, with just one rebellious strand falling beside her cheek. I'd signed up for this evening literature course out of boredom, not expecting much more than a distraction from my routine. But the moment she met my eyes, it didn't feel like boredom anymore. It felt like the start of trouble. We went around the room introducing ourselves. When it was my turn, I said, "Evan. I'm between things right now. Thought I'd read more. Maybe get inspired." Her eyes lingered on me for half a second too long before she nodded. "Inspiration is dangerous," she said. "It has a way of turning your plans upside down." The way she said it made me wonder if she was talking about books at all. Throughout the lesson, she moved between the rows, her heels clicking softly on the old floor. When she leaned over a desk to explain something, her hand would rest lightly on the edge, her perfume sharp, expensive, intoxicating trailing behind her. She spoke about classic literature, but her tone made everything sound like a confession. At one point, she stopped beside me. "Evan," she said, glancing at my barely filled notebook, "you're not writing much." "I'm listening," I replied. Her lips curved slightly. "Good. Listening is far more important than speaking. At least, in the right situations." A few people laughed quietly, but her eyes never left mine. Something passed between us in that moment, a subtle acknowledgement. A test. By the end of the class, I wasn't sure if I'd learned anything about literature, but I'd memorized every detail about her, the way she pushed her glasses up with her thumb, how her gaze softened for some students and sharpened for others, how she made silence work for her rather than rush to fill it. When everyone else was packing up, she said, "Evan, a word." I stayed behind as the room emptied. She closed her notebook and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You seem restless," she said. I shrugged. "Maybe I am." She tilted her head, studying me. "Restlessness can be turned into discipline, if you have the right guidance." The way she said guidance sent a ripple down my spine. Then, as if it were nothing, she handed me an extra reading assignment, a novel about obsession and control. "Read this by next week." "And Evan?" "Yes." "Don't skim it." "I'll know if you do." I left the classroom that night with the book in my hand, the echo of her voice in my head, and the strange feeling that this wasn't just going to be a course. This was going to be a lesson in something else entirely. By the time the next class rolled around, I had read every page of the book she'd given me. Twice. The words were full of dangerous energy, characters pulling each other into a spiral of desire and control, boundaries blurring until you couldn't tell who was in charge. I wondered if she'd chosen it at random. I doubted it. When I arrived, the seat beside me empty last week was taken. She was younger than most in the room, maybe mid-twenties, with a sharp bob haircut and a pair of dark eyes that scanned the space like she was already bored. "I'm Ava," she said, before I could even sit down. Her voice had an edge, like she was challenging me to make small talk. The class began, but Ava didn't take notes. Instead, she watched Ms. Harlow with the kind of focus that wasn't about literature. I caught myself doing the same, and when our eyes met across the desk, Ava smirked as if she knew exactly what I was thinking. Halfway through, Ms. Harlow called on me to share my thoughts about the book. I gave an answer that was more honest than academic about the way control could feel like both a trap and a safety net. Her eyes glinted. "Interesting. And what do you think, Ava?" Ava crossed her legs slowly. "I think control only works if the person being controlled wants it. Otherwise, it's just cruelty." The silence in the room was heavier than last week. Ms. Harlow nodded slowly. "Willingness. That's the difference between power and abuse." Then she turned back to the board, as if the conversation hadn't just pulled the air taut like a wire. For the rest of the class, I could feel something shifting not just between me and Ms. Harlow, but between the three of us. Ava kept leaning toward me, whispering little jokes under her breath, while Ms. Harlow's gaze would flick over every now and then, cool and unreadable. When it ended, Ava packed up quickly but lingered by the door. "You're interesting," she said. "I can tell she likes you." "She?" I asked, though we both knew who. Ava tilted her head toward Ms. Harlow, still at her desk. "She doesn't look at everyone like that." Before I could respond, Ms. Harlow called my name again. Ava gave me a sly smile and left. "You read it," Ms. Harlow said as I approached. I did. Her lips curved faintly. "And you understood it?" She handed me another book, thinner this time, a collection of short stories about temptation. "Next week," she said. "And Evan, bring Ava into the discussion. She's different." The way she said it left me wondering if I was part of some lesson plan no syllabus could explain. By the third week, the air in that classroom was no longer academic. It was charged, alive, like every glance and pause was part of some script I hadn't been given. I sat beside Ava again. She didn't bring a notebook this time, just leaned back in her chair, watching Ms. Harlow as if waiting for her to slip. I couldn't tell if they knew each other from before, or if Ava just had a way of making people feel as though they were already entangled. The discussion was on one of the short stories she'd assigned me about a man who thought he was leading the game, only to realize someone else had been moving the pieces the whole time. When I finished speaking, Ava cut in. "You'd like that," she said under her breath, so only I could hear. "Thinking you're in control until someone takes it away." I glanced at her, but Ms. Harlow's voice drew my attention back. "Evan, Ava, stay for a moment after class." When the others left, she closed the door softly. The rain had returned, tapping against the windows. She didn't sit behind her desk this time, she stood in front of it, arms folded. "You two," she said, "have a way of derailing my lessons." Ava smiled. "Maybe your lessons need derailing." Ms. Harlow's eyes narrowed, but there was no real anger there. If anything, she looked entertained. "I want you both to help me with something," she said. "There's a faculty reading event this Friday. I need 2 volunteers to assist with setup. It's after hours." It didn't sound like a request. Ava agreed instantly. I hesitated, but something in her gaze, that same sharp, evaluating look from our first class, made me nod. Friday night, the building was empty except for the 3 of us. The classroom looked different in the dark shadows pooled in the corners, and the warm glow from the desk lamps felt intimate, almost conspiratorial. We moved chairs, arranged books, stacked wine glasses on a table in the corner. Every now and then, Ms. Harlow would stand behind one of us, close enough that I could feel her presence before I heard her speak. At one point, while Ava was in the hallway, Ms. Harlow stepped closer to me. "You read too quickly," she murmured. "You rush to the ending without letting the tension do its work." I swallowed. "Maybe I don't like waiting." She smiled faintly. "Then you'll never really understand the story." Ava returned just as Ms. Harlow stepped back, but her eyes flicked between us knowingly. When we finished, Ms. Harlow poured 3 glasses of wine. "A small reward," she said. The conversation was casual at first: books, travel, meaningless anecdotes, but under it all, there was a thread pulling tighter. At one point, Ava leaned toward me, her knee brushing mine under the table. Ms. Harlow noticed. I could feel her watching, like she was silently daring me to respond. By the time we left that night, I knew 2 things. 1, I was in far deeper than I'd planned. 2, whatever was happening, Ms. Harlow was the one writing the script. The next Monday, I walked into class to find Ava already there, her chair turned halfway toward mine. "She texted me," Ava said before I'd even sat down. "Said we should meet early." Before I could ask what for, the door opened and Ms. Harlow stepped in. This time, she didn't carry her usual stack of books, just a slim leather folder. She closed the door and locked it, an action so small but so loud in the silence. "No lesson today," she said. "Not the usual kind, anyway." She set the folder on her desk and leaned back against it, crossing her legs. "I've been watching how you 2 work, and how you distract each other. I'm going to use that." Ava smirked. "You make it sound like a threat." "Not a threat," Ms. Harlow replied. "An arrangement." She walked to the whiteboard and wrote in small, deliberate letters. 1, you listen. 2, you don't interrupt. 3, you follow instructions exactly. Then she turned back to us. "You both agree to these rules, or you leave now." I glanced at Ava. She shrugged, amused, and nodded. I followed. For the next hour, she led us through an exercise that was part discussion, part performance. She would give one of us a task: read a passage aloud, interpret a character's motive, stand and deliver a line while the other watched. The way she spoke, the pauses she allowed, the precision of her gaze — it wasn't about literature anymore. It was about control. When Ava stumbled over a line, Ms. Harlow moved closer, her hand resting lightly on Ava's shoulder. "Slower," she instructed. "Make me feel it." The shift in Ava's tone was immediate, and I realized how much Miss Harlow's approval or disapproval could change the energy in the room. Then it was my turn. She handed me a worn copy of the Picture of Dorian Gray and pointed to a passage. I read it once. She stopped me. Again, she said. I read slower. Again, softer this time. By the third reading, the space between words felt stretched, deliberate, and the only thing I was aware of was her watching me. When the exercise ended, she closed the folder. "You're both promising," she said. "But you rush. You want the conclusion before you've earned it? That's not how the best stories work." Ava leaned forward. "And what's the ending, exactly?" Ms. Harlow smiled faintly. "You'll find out. But only if you follow the rules." She unlocked the door and walked out, leaving us in the empty room with the words still on the board. "You listen. You don't interrupt. You follow instructions exactly." I wasn't sure whether this was still a class, or something else entirely. By the fifth week, the rules had become more than words on a whiteboard, they'd become reflex. When Ms. Harlow spoke, we listened. When she paused, we waited. That evening, she didn't even bother with the classroom. Instead, she sent a short email. "Room 204. After hours. Wear black." When Ava and I arrived, the room was dimly lit, the blinds drawn. The desks were pushed to the walls, leaving the center open. A single table stood near the front, holding 3 books, 3 glasses, and a small metronome ticking steadily. Ms. Harlow entered from the side door, also in black, her hair looser than usual. "Close the door," she said. Ava obeyed without hesitation. "There will be no interruptions tonight," Ms. Harlow continued. "You will speak only when addressed." "Understood." We both nodded. She handed each of us a book not to read from, but to hold. "These," she said, "are your anchors. Keep them close." Then the metronome started to feel louder, like it was syncing with my heartbeat. She began giving us instructions, sometimes to me, sometimes to Ava, sometimes to both. "Read a single sentence aloud. Hold the other's gaze for a full minute without looking away. Stand still," while she walked a slow circle around us, her presence pressing in from every side. At one point, she stopped behind Ava and spoke low, almost a whisper, "You're too quick to challenge. Learn to yield." Ava's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Then she stood in front of me. "And you," she said, "still resist the pauses. You fear them. You fill them. Stop." The ticking filled the silence. I forced myself to meet her eyes and say nothing. Her expression softened approval, faint but real. Finally, she moved to the table, poured the wine, and "Saturday this," she said, "is the part where most people think the story ends. But for those who understand, it's just the first chapter." We sat with her in that quiet, the rules still hanging in the air, unspoken but absolute. I realized then that she had never been teaching literature, she'd been teaching us her. And we had learned. When Ava and I finally left the building, the night felt different, heavier with something unfinished. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Whatever came next, it would still be hers to write.